Greetings, this is Paul the Poke from PaulthePoke.com. Welcome to This Week in Prophecy. Also, we got Passover starting tonight at sundown. We have China and Trump tariffs, DNA manipulation. China's at the heart of some of that, too. So, Revelation 9, verse 16, and the number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number. So, two countries who could pull that off, that big of an army, India or China. Now, who knows? This could be a multinational force, but they are also known as the kings from the east in Revelation 16:12. So all that said, I'm leaning pretty heavily toward that being China. Now, they are being backed into a financial corner. And frankly, it's their own doing with some of their trade and economic practices. But what do countries do when their economy is tanking? Now, historically, it's a military response. I mean, history is just full of that. So, we got this from Kyle Bass. China is likely to use this chaos to invade Taiwan soon. Xi is dealing with a full economic collapse, an insolvent banking system, and skyrocketing youth unemployment. He's going to be forced to let go of the currency peg and change the narrative. Now, letting go of the currency peg, that means he would cash in all the debt that he's purchased from us, and he would give up U.S. dollars, which that's going to be their problems if they run out of U.S. dollars. The yuan's not a strong currency, so that's their issue. So this is a piece from 1945.com. They're of the opinion China will launch an invasion of Taiwan in the next few months, and that's according to intelligence sources. So, thinking is it's no less than 6 months away. Okay. Takeover of Taiwan increasingly being considered a question of not if, but when. So, now for those of you who want to read this in some more detail, feel free to go through this, but that's the guts of it. What does that look like? How does that go down? I don't know, but there's some thinking out there that, you know, if they get pushed, you're gonna have to grab some resources. Now, that said, President Trump announced tariffs to the globe on April 2nd, 2025. And with the announcement of tariffs, the Hang Seng China stock index crashed 9.1%. So China, of course, didn't like that. And then which they started to respond. And here's a post, social media, from Donald J. Trump. Yesterday, China issued retaliatory tariffs of 34% on top of their already record-setting tariffs, non-monetary tariffs, illegal subsidization of companies, and massive long-term currency manipulation. Despite my warning that any country that retaliates against the U.S. by issuing additional tariffs above and beyond their already existing long-term tariff abuse of our nation will be immediately met with a new and substantial higher tariffs, over and above those initially set. Therefore, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, the United States will impose additional tariffs on China of 50% effective April 9th. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. Negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. Thank you for your attention in this manner. All right, there we go. This is done the 7th. China says it will not bow down to President Trump's tariff threats on April 7th. And so let's just take a look at China's dependence on U.S. trade. So roughly, between 20 and 25% of consumer electronics, of all those that China makes, those go to the United States. Now, if they lose that, there's nobody out there who's going to absorb that 22% of their exports. So that's a big deal. And so we're looking at all these different things that China makes and exports. And, you know, home appliances, 19% of what China makes goes to the United States, and we buy it. Now, those things now will be very expensive, like 140, 150% more. So if they cost $1,000, that'd be at least over $2,000 on the cost of some appliances, whatever they may be. But you get the point. If we step away from China, there's no buyer out there that will absorb this amount of product. And they're in a world of hurt. So they're the one that stands to lose out of this. Now, will our prices go up in the short term? Yes. And will factories come here, build these things? Will new relationships be established? Yes. Could be a little bumpy in the short term. But that's what we're looking at potentially. April 8th, Trump raised tariffs on China to 104%. April 9th, this is a big one right here. U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent declined to rule out the possibility of delisting Chinese stocks from the U.S. stock exchanges. That's about $1.1 trillion worth of business. That would hurt. Trump increases tariffs again on China to 145%. This is a couple of days ago on the 10th. And then yesterday, China raises tariffs against the United States from 84 to 125%. That'd be effective today. And Trump announced he exempted smartphones, computers, chips from new tariffs, including those imported from China. So still, I mean, even like with the electronics, I guess, well, semiconductors, that's only 4%. That kind of surprised me. I guess that tells me how much we got coming from Taiwan, which China takes Taiwan. That number goes up. But only 4% of the semiconductors, that's only, a $9 billion business for China to export semiconductors to the United States. I would have thought that had been a little higher. Oh, well. And so some people are probably wondering, well, where do you get China in the Bible? So I got a couple of things here. This is from the Genesis record, Henry Morris. Isaiah 49:12. Look, they come from far away. Look, some come from the north and west, and others from the land of Sinim. Genesis 10, verses 16 through 18. We're going to focus on the Sinites in this list. Eventually, the families of the Canaanites were scattered. So, now I know some of you guys who followed the blog before have heard this before, but for those of you who are new, this is where we get the idea that China is in the Bible. Well, from Revelation, for one, the kings of the east. Far East country named Sinim, together with references in ancient secular histories to the people in the Far East called Sinai, at least suggest the possibility that some of Sin's descendants migrated eastward, while others went south into the land of Canaan. It is significant that the Chinese people have always been identified by the prefix Sino, Sino-Japanese War, Sinology, study of Chinese history. The name Sin is frequently encountered in Chinese names in the form of Siang, or its equivalent. Evidence is tenuous, but of all the names in the Table of Nations, it does seem that two sons of Canaan, Heth, Hittites, Cathay, Cathay, and Sin, Sinites, Sinim equal China, are the most likely to have become ancestors of the Oriental peoples. Now, I know in the past there's also Cathay Pacific was an airline. I think that was a Far Eastern airline. Since it seems reasonable that divine inspiration would include in such a table information concerning the ancestries or the ancestry of all major streams of human development, it is reasonable to conclude that the Mongoloid peoples, and therefore also American Indians, have come mostly from the Hamitic line. So that's part of the reasoning for why I think China is a player in the end times. So with that, we're going to transfer to a little DNA, genetic manipulation. Genesis 6, verse 4, the Nephilim were on earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God, angels, came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Now, some people, they don't see this as a hybrid race, the Nephilim. Like men of old, men of renown would be like grand in stature, mighty men, powerful men. Some of us believe, and I'm in this camp, these are hybrids. Angels, they left their heavenly abode, came down, intermingled with humanity. And that's where we end up with some of these legends. I mean, because every culture has a giant legend. I mean, we even have pro sports, New York Football Giants, San Francisco Giants. All cultures have giant, I don't know what you'd call them, fables. Some people think they're fables, but stories of giants in their cultures. But this event, in some circles, is the original genetic manipulation. And we get the same thing from ancient books of Enoch and Jasher confirm angels and humanity interbreeding, mixing DNA, and the result was a genetic hybrid, the Nephilim. So it's not, and those are books that, or in the case of Enoch, came from, was put on the ark, ended up in Noah's ark. That's how we got it. And then he was translated or raptured, as some would say. God took him and he was no more. So, all that said, take a look at this wolf. According to Colossal Biosciences, this is a dire wolf. 2 of them. Actually, there are 3 of them. 2 males, Romulus and Remus. And then there's a female. I forget the female's name. Dire wolf. Here's a quote from CEO Ben Lamb. Our team took DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull and made healthy dire wolf puppies. So they manipulated the genetic code to kind of resurrect this thing from the past. It was allegedly extinct. The wolves, thought to have been extinct for over 12,500 years, were as much as 25% larger than gray wolves and had a slightly wider head, light, thick fur, and a stronger jaw. Now, if you want to read this, click on this Axios article. You can read. It's just a nice highlight overview of what happened. Also, I think a Daily Mail put out a pretty extensive article about it, so as well. But it brings up all kinds of questions. Do we need to be doing this? And then this is where things get really interesting. This CEO of Colossal Biosciences, Ben Lamb, he was on with Joe Rogan. And he went on to further elaborate about the Chinese effort to genetically manipulate and modify human DNA. Now, Lamb claimed BGI, or Beijing Genomics Institute, has openly stated that its goal is to sequence as much of the global population as possible in search of genes linked to intelligence and act on what they find. So they're not hiding it. They are looking to genetically modify people, clone them, and then put certain characteristics according to what they found with, in DNA analysis. So here's the link to this, and we'll go to the full link here. Highly recommend listening to this or listening to Rogan's interview with this guy. Here's the link of it on Twitter. Biotech founder Ben Lamb explained how Chinese scientists cloned embryos and then edited them to make babies immune to HIV. Lamb said there's growing debate over whether those same babies were also genetically enhanced for increased intelligence. Science is unclear. Some say yes, some say no. I think they estimate if this were the case, these kids would be 6 or 7. But they are not hiding it. They're telling you what they want to do. Chinese genetics company claims they use COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to collect global DNA. And BGI offered free COVID tests to countries around the world, not as a humanitarian gesture. Well, not just. Yeah, we're here for the people. But as a way to gather genetic data on the entire population. They're openly saying we are sequencing as much as we can of the world population looking for genes for intelligence. There you go. It's about a 2-3 minute clip. Yeah, 3-minute clip. Worth your listen. But, so we are in a time where genetics are being modified. And that was always the thing before then. You know, some think that one of the reasons Noah and his family were spared is because they did not engage in any of this stuff pre-flood. And the mixing of seed, if you will, was a cause, a reason. And there was plenty of sin going on. There was lots of violence. But the human genetic code was being disrupted by these fallen angels, and God put a stop to it. Thus we had judgment and a global flood. Now that didn't stop these folks, these fallen angels. They did it again after the flood. And some people think they may still be around here in different places, whether they're underground in caves or wherever. But food for thought. Some of you guys may be hearing this for the first time. You think, okay, dude, you've lost it. Okay, that's fine. But that line of thinking's out there. Encourage you to investigate it. Luke 17, verses 26 through 27, just as it was in the days of Noah. And that's the concern. We had all sorts of genetic manipulation, modification taking place with animals and people and hybrids. And, God made things according to its kind, would be his terminology, how he used it. And man is perverting that and mixing that. It wasn't intended to be that way. And so, just as it was in the days of Noah, we're doing it now. So also will it be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And so marrying, that wasn't just people, but, humanity. And then you can read some of the texts in Jasher and Noah, and it talks about fallen angels would have their own little family with human women. And then that's how that went down. So, idea of marrying, being given in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and then the flood came and destroyed it. And that's the way it'll be up until he comes again. Life will just be carrying on, and then when it starts, it will be on. You won't need to ask, hey, are we there yet? You'll know, because it'll be so over the top. Jesus made the comment, it'll be the worst time in human history. And that includes a global flood. It'll be worse than that. So whatever's coming is worse than a global flood. Something to think about. So that's all I got for today. Wishing everybody a good day. We got Easter coming up as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. The Jewish folks today are celebrating Passover. Well, that starts at sunset tonight. And ask everybody to feel free to share this with others at PaulthePoke.com. And appreciate everybody watching. Wishing everybody a good weekend. Take care. Bye.